Hey guys, welcome to another Ask Zac episode. I'm Zac Childs. So I had another episode that was all queued up and ready to go, talking about a Telecaster guitar of mine. And then I realized that January 17th is the 1 year anniversary of Reggie Young's passing. So Reggie was a huge guitar hero of mine, and to many others. And I found that out in the Truetone Lounge interviewing guys. You'd hear Brent Mason or Steve Warner or John Leventhal, all sorts of cats, talking about the importance of Reggie Young and his playing. They just enjoyed his playing in it and was a huge influence on them. Reggie had such a prolific career, and a lot of times you can wonder why. And a lot of times you can think, well, it was just because he was a great guitar player. Well, he was. He was a stellar guitar player. But also, he was the kind of guy you wanted to spend time with. So if your goal is just to hire a great guitar player, there's a lot of great guitar players, especially here in Nashville or LA or New York. But if you wanted a guy that was not only a great guitar player who played great parts, but he was also very humble and sweet and wonderful to be around, Reggie Young was at the, pretty much the top of the list. And he had such a vocabulary on the guitar, and he had this background of playing, R&B music and playing country music and playing pop music. You think about a guy that played, when I was doing that little intro piece, you had Son of a Preacher Man. You had Memphis Soul Stew, you had Suspicious Minds, and then Driftaway, which is kind of, if you had to pick one tune, which would be a miserable thing to do, but if you had to pick one tune with Reggie's playing on it, that would be the one to pick. So that's why we're doing this, to celebrate Reggie and his great memory and all the great things that he played on. I think about, the first time I heard about Reggie. Of course, I had heard his playing before, but I didn't know his name until there was this country musician's book that came out. And so this was done by Guitar Player magazine back in the 80s. And this, of course, pre-internet, they would recycle older content that was important in these books. And so the Guitar Player magazine would periodically do these books, and this one was great. It had a segment on Reggie. I saw it, and I saw some of the people that he had played with, and I was impressed. And then I found some other articles. The thing that really started to make me even more interested was in this issue of Country Guitar, of course, with a here you have Travis Tritt with a beautiful mullet. That's beautiful hair. Any woman would be happy to have that hair. Sorry, if Travis Tritt is watching, I apologize. So, but there was a article on Reggie, and the writer of the article was John Jorgensen. So here's the little spread. Old Reggie with his '69 Telecaster kind of lounging across one of his road cases. Great article by John. John had a career doing interviews in guitar magazines in kind of the late 80s, early 90s. And he of course did great work because he's such a phenomenal player. So in this, I found out about, of course, Reggie playing on things like the Merle Haggard stuff, like Think I'll Just Stay Here and Drink, and That's the Way Love Goes. And I found out about him not using the point of the pick, but using kind of the other end, the rounded end of the pick to play with. And I found out, that does make a difference. It does give a smoother sound. And so I started doing that in the early 90s from listening to him. And of course, you hear things like Reggie's volume pedal work, which Reggie was using a volume pedal back in the early 60s, which was way ahead of his time. hardly any guitar players, especially session guys, they didn't use volume pedals. But by the early 60s, he was using one. And at the time, he was playing a Gibson ES-345. And he had disconnected the baritone switch, which of course is that big honking switch that has all this circuitry to it to make the guitar sound very different, out of phase, and other sounds. And he had that removed, or at least decoupled electronically. And he used a volume pedal and a Standell amplifier. And that's what he used when he was opening for the Beatles with the Bill Black combo. And the Beatles saw him playing, and they loved his playing. And George Harrison was asking him about his sound because he loved the sound of that Standell amp with a 15-inch JBL speaker, and he loved the string bending and such, and the volume swells and things that Reggie was doing even back in the early 60s, and was using an unwound third string, which the Beatles were not. They were still using a wound third string instead of a plain one. So yeah, and I love his volume pedal work. Very influential. Just the, he would do harmonics with it. Of course, and that was something also that Larry Carlton was doing out in L.A. But Larry started using volume pedal well after Reggie was. Not saying one was an influence on the other. I think both of them were influenced by steel players. I think Reggie was playing with a steel player that used a volume pedal, and Larry Carlton played a session with Buddy Emmons and started using a volume pedal. So, Reggie always had a great sound. He always fit in, always played great little parts. I've kind of replicated his sound somewhat today as best as I can with the gear that I have, and so I have a Script Logo MXR Dynacomp from the 70s, and I have a Sparkle Drive, and I've also got a volume pedal. I've got a Boss DD2. And I have a TC Electronics chorus pedal because, Reggie used the TC chorus a lot, especially in the 80s when it was during the era of chorus. And, yeah. So, people hired Reggie because he was a great guy and he was a great guy to work with. I first contacted Reggie in the early 90s. I was a Belmont student. And I had made a demo of my playing on one of those short cassettes that had just enough space on each side for one song. And on one side I had an up-tempo, and the other one I had a ballad. And I contacted Reggie, and he took my call. And I asked him if I could send him a demo of my playing, and he said absolutely. And he gave me his address, and he said send it to me. And then give me, about a week or two so I have enough time to listen to it and then call back. And so that's what I did. He gave me great feedback, and he was very honest. I asked him about, how did you get your start in the session career? And he said, I don't know. It just happened. And then I asked him, what kind of guitar and amp should I play? And he said, well, you should play what you're comfortable with. And such honest answers, never saying do what I did or play what I played. And and through the years he helped me with some vintage guitar Ask Zac questions that were in print, where I was having trouble identifying somebody from the Muscle Shoals from a video, and it ended up being an early shot of Eddie Hinton, and he helped me with that. And then I got to do a feature on his Forever Young album for Vintage Guitar Magazine. And then we did the Truetone Lounge episode with him that was 3 parts. And I'm going to be real honest here. It was a little bit of a struggle for me to show my hero as an old man. And he was an old man, and his health was deteriorating. And but I knew I knew we were supposed to do it, but it's still, because he's, your guitar hero, and I wanted to see him like he was when I met him, in the 90s and such. But I was really glad we did it. And of course, a lot of it, or it had everything to do with his wife Jenny, who made it happen and who was very kind. And yeah, so I want to take just a look at it, at like Drift Away, and talk about like the different things that he did on that song. Well, first off, I asked him, I said, Reggie, was that something that you came up with right on the spot? And he said no. He said the intro to Drift Away was something that he had been working on as an instrumental. And so it was only on the session, in Nashville in the early 70s, that he realized that what he had made up for his own song would work as the intro for this tune by Minter Williams. And yeah, and it worked. But then everything else was ad-libbed. So you have the first part of the song, which was played on the Les Paul Deluxe, which had many humbucking pickups, which of course I'm playing a Telecaster today. And he doubled it, and it made it sound like chorus, because there were no chorus pedals per se at this point. So I'm using the TC electronic chorus pedal to kind of play the intro. So you have the that kind of thing. Then you have the fills that he plays on the verse, which are all kind of classic R&B fills. I mean, it's a textbook on great R&B guitar playing. And then you have what he plays in the chorus, which was not done on the Les Paul Deluxe. It was done with his '69 black Telecaster, black Tele Custom with the binding. And that's where you get the great things like the great part. And then you have the ending, which I'm not sure if that was the Les Paul or the Tele, but it was through a Garnet Herzog. And because I was asking him when we were looking at the Garnet, which was this tube preamp thing that was to create overdrive, and it was developed for Randy Bachman because he was trying to replicate the sound he got at the beginning of the Guess Who's American Woman. So he had this Garnet create this Herzog device, and Reggie got one, and he started using one by the late 60s, and he was definitely using it on the tail end of Drift Away. So all the stuff during in the final chorus and the outro of the tune is the Herzog. So another interesting thing about Reggie was a bit of a minimalist, and this will make fans of Keith Williams' 5-Watt World happy. He basically played two guitars for a lot of his career. Now, early on, he played a 345, and then he started playing a Telecaster about 1966. He had a maple cap Tele, kind of like this guitar. This is a 67. His was a 66, so it would be similar finish, obviously maple cap neck, but his had the transition gold logo, not this black CBS logo, and it would have Kluson machine heads. But otherwise, it would be basically the same as this 1967 Tele of mine. So he also had some of Chips Moman, had a couple guitars that he used, and of course he was famous for using the Scotty Moore Super 400 on the Elvis stuff that was cut in '69, like Suspicious Minds and In the Ghetto and that stuff. And then he traded in his 66 Telecaster like this for that 69 Tele that he played from then until his passing. After his period of time in Memphis, and then a very short period of time in Atlanta, he moved to Nashville, and soon after moving to Nashville, he got a 57 Strat. So And those were kind of his main tools from then on. I mean, he used some other guitars every once in a while, but that 1957 Stratocaster and that 1969 Tele, those were his main guitars. And he was a huge fan of the Deluxe Reverb. And so today I've got one, and he used Celestion Vintage 30s, which I liked because of J.D. Simo. And so then, of course, it was a boon, to find out that Reggie liked them too. So, yeah, so he was a bit of a minimalist. Of course, during the 80s, he had to use more rack stuff and things like that. But he was basically a Strat, a Tele, a Deluxe Reverb, and a couple of stomp boxes. That was his sound. And what a great player. What a great guy. His funeral was really interesting. Of course, not many funerals do you have B.J. Thomas and Steve Warner and Jesse Coulter singing at them, and Will McFarland. And of course, the congregation was full of a who's who of the great guitar players in Nashville and Muscle Shoals. And it was interesting to hear the people talk about him. It was very interesting to hear his family talk about him, and his family talk about how they wanted to preserve Reggie the man, because they were proud of Reggie the musician, but they really wanted people to know what a great guy he was. And those that knew him know that he was a great guy. So there it is. Thank you for watching. I've created a Spotify playlist on what I think are Reggie's best tunes. It's a little bit heavy on Merle Haggard stuff because I just really like that, and a lot of the Merle Haggard stuff is actually a Strat and not a Tele. If you listen to it with an open ear, you can hear things like Leonard and other songs, and you can tell it's that Stratocaster. Sometimes it's the out of phase thing, and sometimes it's the middle pickup or neck pickup, through a Dynacomp and into a Fender amp with a volume pedal. So take a gander. Please subscribe. We're going to start taking questions so we can really make it Ask Zac. So my email address we're going to put up on the screen at the tail end. And so please start sending me in questions that we can answer on the future episodes. Please subscribe. Please hit the bell. Please comment below. Please share it with others. And I just want to thank you so much, and I hope you have a great week. God bless you.